Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Comic Source Comic Boom collaboration, day 3 of the 12 days of Spawnmas, which means we're up to issue number 3. So if you didn't join us for the first day or the second day, first of all, let me say shame on you. And secondly, what are we doing here, right? So I have always felt like not reading Spawn, not reading every issue of Spawn has been a little bit of a hole in my comic reading. I certainly read, I don't know, the first 40 issues or so, bought them back in the day, thought they were great. Obviously, it's Todd McFarlane, the guy's a legend, but never had read all of it, right? And recently, we know Todd has launched his Spawn universe, and he's hoping organically it'll grow and do a kind of a shared superhero universe that's bigger than just Spawn and bigger than Spawn-related characters. And he's inviting plenty of creators to come and write and draw and create in his, what he's calling the Spawn universe right now, but may morph into something else. So, being that I'm reading Gunslinger Spawn and I'm reading King Spawn, and Scorched is soon to be out, and they're referencing things that I don't have any idea about because I haven't read Spawn in like 260 issues. Yeah. So I thought, you know what? How can I remedy this? Well, I just need to read all 300 plus issues of Spawn, right? Well, as long as I'm going to be reading them, you guys know me, why not talk about them? So next year we will do an issue a day, basically. There's 320 issues, let's say, and so that it's 365 days in a year. That gives us about a 40-day cushion if we can miss here or there, which might happen. But why not kick it off to coincide with the 12 days of the Comic Source by doing 12 days of Spawnmas? So in the 12 days leading up to Christmas, we're going to be talking about each of these issues in turn. Now, what Rocky and I discovered in reading the first couple issues is this stuff, at least for me, at least for the first 2 issues, it has really held up. I mean, you got to admit that McFarlane's style and artistic talent is timeless, right? That's always going to stand the test of time. If you like comic book art, if you like dynamic art with detail and big giant capes and chains and spikes, you're always going to love Todd McFarlane's art. But in terms of the story, Rocky and I were talking about it, how much people hated McFarlane's writing on Spider-Man. It's a bit hokey, especially the dialogue. Even here in Spawn, he tends to get a little wordy at times, but I got to say, despite the fact that some of these are a little bit, the ideas are a little tropey, they're classic tropes, a deal with the devil, losing your wife and having her marry best friend, sacrificing, losing memory, like all this sort of stuff. Yeah, these are classic storytelling threads. And so I don't necessarily blame Todd for diving into them. He's given them a different spin, and, it's with his fantastic art. So I think it's really holding up. I'm excited. I'm more excited. I have to admit, like, doing this was sort of selfish in that it's like, well, I need to read. I feel like I need to read the whole run of Spawn anyway, so why not podcast about it? But like needing to do it, feeling a little bit like homework. What's the silver lining? Well, I can podcast about it, and that's how I'll take it back. But now I'm getting actually excited to read this. I don't want to read too far ahead, because if I'm gonna start in the new year with issue 13 and head forward doing one a day, I don't want to read up to like issue 25 right now and then have to go back and reread. Not that I wouldn't enjoy it, but I don't have time to be reading comics twice these days, honestly. But I'm getting excited to read these and get caught up. So I don't know. How do you feel, Rocky, after checking out the first couple of issues?
Well, the same way I feel after reading issues, this third issue here. A lot of tropes, but in a good way. This, this third issue comes out in, August of 1992. You could tell reading this issue, it deals with corporate greed, obvious the corporate boss, misogynist, hitting on his secretary, the scumbag. McFarlane goes out of his way to make it very clear who the bad guys are and the good guys are in this. Very, very tropey, but in a fun way, in a good way, in a way that, frankly, in today's politically sensitive, overly sensitive times, maybe he couldn't get away with now. But this was at the end of the corporate greed of the 80s. This was the early years. 92 was the early years of the Clinton administration, but we still had that sort of corporate mentality. This was the beginning of the corporate. I remember 92. Was my first year of law school. That was really the first time where there was affirmative action, and there was a great growth of the politics changed. Identity politics was in its infancy, or much less developed than it is now, and the exposition heavy. I mean, so many things are re-explained in issue 1. It's re-explained in issue 2. The basic plot is re-explained in the narrative captions of issue 3. So, bearing in mind you had a month break between each issue, I literally don't have to read issues 1 and 2 to know. And it's not just because I'm reading issue 3 right away, but a lot of exposition. But I'm really enjoying this, and it
Remember when
actually makes.
comics used to do that?
Yeah,
Remember
I
when
know.
comics used to give you a recap within the story
And
itself?
I don't mind it. I find myself strangely, I kind of enjoy it. It's kind of refreshing not to always have to go back and have to reread, and because nowadays the narrative habits of a lot of writers, I think it's a little bit of self pretension in some of them. They don't want to rehash, and they want to minimize the caption boxes to always show off the art. And here though, with McFarlane, you can see as we get going, you can see that there's, well, I guess we blotted out all the narration, but you'll see by the number of what you blocked out that there was quite an amount of exposition here, but at the same time, it still allowed Mark McFarlane's trademark art to shine through.
Yeah, the other part of that, and Marvel does it, DC refuses to do it in terms of recapping, because like, go back, a perfect example, go back and either read or listen to our either read Civil War, Marvel Superheroes Secret Wars, not Civil War, Secret Wars. Either go back and read Marvel Superhero Secret Wars, or go listen to our podcast episodes that go issue by issue. And it happens in every single issue of the series. They spend a page or two in the beginning. Hey, here's what's happened so far. That used to be a very common thing. Writers always were told when they were coming up that you have to write every comic as if it's someone's first comic. And so if issue 3 of Spawn is someone's first comic, they're going to need a little bit of explanation about how we got here. Well, what Marvel does these days is they do, inside the front cover, they'll have that paragraph and say, hey, basically this is what's going on. And I sort of feel like it's a consequence of the fact that comics are only 20 pages now, a lot of times, rather than 22 or 24 like they were back in the day. So you're already losing space. And so for that reason, you don't necessarily have space to do that sort of recap. So again, Marvel solves that problem by doing that paragraph. And for whatever reason, I think because Dan Didio didn't like it, they've never done it at DC. But I remember when Bendis came over, coming from Marvel, he was used to having that sort of crutch. And on his action run, especially, they would do a splash page that had all these, it would be like Lois Lane's desk at the Daily Planet, and it would have all these clues and Post-its, and emails would be open on the screen or whatnot, and it would give you enough clues that you could kind of jog your memory if you had read the issue before. It wouldn't necessarily be a recap in terms of detail that you would get inside a Marvel book, but it would be close. And I think that you're right. Like, this Spawn book is of the 90s. It's still in that time where doing recaps was much more common. It was probably when it started to go away in the 90s, where you wouldn't see a book recap itself in its own pages during the first couple of pages of the story. But I agree with you. Like, as much as when you're a kid, it would be a month, right? There wasn't a lot of binge reading. It wasn't like you were picking these all up digitally and reading them all at once. Like, even if you were buying back issues, it was rare that you would be able to find a big long run and read them all back to back to back. So having those recaps made a lot of sense. And yeah, Spawn is 92. It is of its time, and it does involve those. So I'm with you. I don't necessarily mind it. The other thing is that circulation back then, just in general, was bigger circulation numbers than we have now. We mentioned issue 1, and keep in mind that Todd McFarlane was the biggest comic artist biggest comic creator of the day. Well, issue 1 of Spawn, we mentioned, sold 1.7 copies. Now, I wish that we actually had data so we
1.7
knew.
million copies.
Yeah, 1.7. What did I say?
1.7.
Oh, yeah,
You forgot the
1.7
million.
million. Yeah, 1.7 million copies. Now, I don't have sales numbers for issue 2. I looked everywhere to try to find them. I don't have sales numbers for issue 3 either. Eventually, as we go on, we'll get to the point where Comicron, which is a fantastic resource, uh, we'll have that, and we'll give the sales numbers when we can. Um, but yeah, I wish that we did. I mean, I couldn't even venture a guess. I mean, obviously 1.7 for the first one. You got to think that the second issue must have at least sold in the hundreds of thousands, right? I mean,
Yeah.
could it have not? I mean, any.
I'm sure it would have. Good Lord. I'm sure it would have.
Yeah. So again, I wish I had those numbers, but unfortunately I don't. But anyway, let's talk a little bit about what happens in the third issue. So it starts off, and again, we have a lot of exposition from Spawn, from Al Simmons as he's standing in the alley. You can see all those black boxes where we redacted it, and he's standing in the alley, and this is where he's sort of rehashing. This is where he's thinking to himself about, hey, what's happened? Why has my memory been erased? Why don't I have my life anymore? And in this way, this is how McFarlane gets us up to speed. For anybody who hasn't been following along, about what the first couple issues of Spawn have been about. That you get enough here with Spawn thinking to himself about what he's been through recently to get caught up, to get to know what's going on in the series, to be brought up to speed. So it starts off with him remembering his wife's name. But again, there's an in-story reason, right? It's not just, hey, here's a paragraph on the inside cover like Marvel's doing now that basically says, here's what's been going on. So he also thinks about having met the Violator last issue and what that might be. And, he's really having a tough time. He's remembered his wife's name. He sacrificed his humanity, his soul, and realizes he got a bad deal. The fact that he can't turn himself back into an African American man, he can only turn himself into a white man. And he looks like Hamburger, right? Like his face is all burned up. He's all scarred. He knows he got tricked, right? Deal with the devil.
Seen better days.
Yeah, he definitely has seen better days. So as we turn the page, we meet the guy that he made the deal with, and learn that they don't come right out and say
They don't say his name. Does he have a name?
Yeah, he does. I'm trying to remember what it is.
But I don't think he's named in the actual issue. I think he's named later on, isn't he?
Yeah, he's named.
He's
named later on. I think in issue 4, but
Malabalgia.
I've never known how
Malabalgia
to pronounce it correctly. It's never been clear to me, but yeah, I mean, basically, I mean, they call him the devil, Malabolgia. But yeah,
okay.
he isn't named in his first appearance here, but it's not clear. It sort of seems like from the context of what he has to say that he can read Al Simmons' mind, the thoughts, and he's thinking, oh, you pathetic fool, you maggot, you didn't read the fine print. I've been doing this for a long time. I'm going to make your life a living hell. I'm going to use you to capture other mortal souls. And basically just, it's a lot of sort of demonic dialogue, I guess you'd say. It's not the best. It's showing McFarlane's a little rough around the edges when it comes to dialogue, but he definitely is a mustache twirling type villain. And I never really thought that his design was that scary. I mean, he's got like this bulging stomach and what looks like bad old lady hair, and I don't know. I just thought his design could have been better. I mean, I feel the same way about Violator. They don't really come across as scary to me. I don't know. What do you think, Rob?
And you mentioned it. You alluded to that in our previous reviews of the first 2 issues, because even the toy figures, no one wanted the Violator figure because they look bloated, fat. They look disgusting. They look devilish, and horrific, but they look disgusting. And like you said, there's probably a reason why those Violator action figures are probably worth more on eBay than the Spawn and Angela action figures, because nobody wanted to have the Violator or the Malabulgia figure. So
Yeah.
I mean, it's not surprising.
Yeah, and I just find it strange. I mean, Todd McFarlane, again, this is the height of his artistic powers, and I don't know, I find the design to be a little bit strange. But anyway, after he gets done with his couple pages of exposition, we check in on Sam and Twitch, who we've talked about before, a couple of cops for NYPD. And Sam is sort of complaining that they keep burying him under reports when they should be out looking for the guy who's killing all the mafia people, which we know to be the Violators, going around pulling the hearts out of people. Meanwhile, Spawn's plan to find out who his wife is, he's remembered that he worked for the CIA. He remembers his wife's name is Wanda. So he thinks the best way for him to find out is to go to CIA headquarters, and they must have a file on him with his wife's address. And so he does go there, and he sees one of his old colleagues sexually harassing his secretary. And this is where he sort of shows his true colors, the fact that Al Simmons is a heroic person at heart, a moral person at heart. So he threatens the guy, says, hey, you need to pay your child support because you haven't paid any alimony or child support since your divorce, and you need to stop abusing your secretary. If you ever lay hands on her again, I'll come back and you'll be sorry.
This is where I thought this was so funny. I mean, it's not enough that this guy, the CIA guy, it's not enough that he's a misogynist pig. He treats his secretary like shit. He's a sexist. At one point, he says to his secretary, you got to do more with your lips than just, taste food, and I got something you can do with those lips. I mean, this is blatantly hitting on, trying to get his secretary to cheat on her husband with the boss. And then to top it off, that wasn't enough. McFarlane had to make him a deadbeat dad who doesn't pay child support. I mean, he keeps adding on as if, there was no subtlety here as to this guy. There was no nuance. This guy is an asshole, plain and simple. And McFarlane just goes full bore. I mean, it just cries out 80s and early 90s. Bad guy.
Yeah. It's almost like Todd was worried, well, if I don't make this guy unlikable enough, then people might think that Spawn is overreacting or what have you. So he makes him as unlikable as possible. Completely lecherous. Never pays his alimony or his child support. It just
my favorite line. One of my favorite lines is when Spawn says to him, "Either pay your child support or your wife will collect on your life insurance policy."
Yeah. Who says that Todd McFarlane can't turn a phrase?
Yeah, he's good. There's humor in this comic. And there's been humor. There's really good humor and good dialogue, particularly between Sam and Twitch, the detectives. I thought, I got to give McFarlane credit here. This was a genuine surprise when you compare this to how he was at telling a story in his early Spider-Man work, which wasn't very good in his early issues of Spider-Man. But no, this was... like I said, this is good, fun, late 80s, early 90s dialogue. It works.
Yeah, the other thing that's funny about it, right, is, or ironic maybe, funny, not necessarily how funny, is, you just mentioned how criticized McFarlane was for his early Spider-Man work. Then he comes and he does this, and people are saying the same thing. That's not written very well, blah, blah. So is that a comment on the writing of comics today, right? Like without noticing, has the writing in comics today degraded to the point that we look back on Todd McFarlane early Spawn issues and say, well, that writing in comparison to nowadays is actually pretty good.
It is.
It's an interesting thing to think about. I don't know that you can make that broad statement and say in general comics today are not written as well.
But he could hold his own. McFarlane could hold his own with this.
Well, and the other thing is it's such a different aesthetic now. You talked about it yourself, how they don't want to cover up the art and, things aren't recapped. It's a different time. It's hard to compare. It would be like comparing like baseball teams from, like the 1927 Yankees to like the, 2013 Seattle Mariners or something like that. The era is so different. It makes it hard to make that comparison. But if that's the reason that this is holding up, then hey, I'm glad that that's the case. So anyway, Spawn does succeed in getting the file about himself, and when he reads it, he says, "God save me, no." When he finds out something in her file, she's living in Queens, and he says it can't be, and we're about to find out just what that is. Again, he uses a little bit of his power to transform himself, and he's complaining that all he can ever do is turn himself into a white guy with blonde hair. That makes it even worse. Feels like he looks like a beach bum, but he is nervous to go and talk to her and see her for the first time. Feels like a kid on the first date. And it's a little hokey here. This might have been one of the things that maybe a misstep, because when he rings the doorbell, she comes out in this, I don't even know. I mean, it's a dress, but it's clearly McFarlane is no fashion designer. This thing is ugly. It's got like mesh showing off like half a boob on each side and the arms. And
obviously, I'm still caught in the early 90s, Jace. I think she looks gorgeous here. I mean, come on.
I'm not saying that she doesn't look attractive. I'm saying that is one hell of an ugly dress. I think it's one hell of an ugly dress anyway.
I love the V-neck. I love the V, the open V for the breast accentuation there. I mean,
it looks more like something a stripper would wear or a hooker than something she would wear to.
I guess that says a lot about me. Thanks.
Yeah, she's like, I got this big business party to go to. That's what you're gonna wear to a business? All that skin, like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. It seems like something maybe a celebrity would wear to like the Academy Awards or something, because they know it shows off so much skin, it's going to get everybody talking, But anyway, Al Simmons, it's the equivalent of having been in prison, right? He hasn't seen a woman in years, 5 years. And this is a woman that presumably has seen naked. It was his wife. And he loves her, and he gave up his soul for her, and he's come back and made all these sacrifices. And she answers the door wearing, a very revealing dress. So, he's a bit speechless, and he had this whole thing prepared about, hey, I'm from the SPCA, and we're going around checking if people are taking care of their dogs, blah, blah, blah. And then as she's standing there talking to him, her daughter walks up. Now, this is really, really twisting the knife for Al Simmons, because here's the thing. He knows that his wife, Wanda is her name, by the way, Wanda Blake. And I will take a moment to point out that Todd McFarlane's wife is named Wanda. So obviously that's where the name comes from. But anyway, Wanda Blake, Al Simmons' wife, always wanted a child. She always wanted to be a mom, but they were never able to conceive. So he's gone for 5 years. She remarries, and lo and behold, she's able to have a kid. So that's like I said, twisting the knife, proving that the reason they couldn't have a kid it was him. He was shooting blanks or had something wrong with his plumbing. It wasn't her. That makes him feel even worse. And he faints, like, of all things, he faints right in front of her.
I mean, he comes back as a California beach bum and discovers he also has a low sperm count. I mean, this just rips him apart. I mean, you got to feel sorry for this guy. I mean, the white skin is bad enough, but the low sperm count, I mean, come on. I mean, no wonder he's absolutely devastated. No wonder the devil is laughing behind his back, pointing and laughing. Literally.
Yeah, well, I think that's part of the point, right? Why he was chosen, why Maldrabolgia chose him to be the guy. But at the same time, just like with the CIA guy that was hitting on his secretary, where there was no subtlety, there's no subtlety here. Right?
Yeah.
Like McFarlane, I'm just gonna keep piling it on. Okay. Yeah. So you lost your memories. Okay. So you look like hamburger. Yeah. Your skin's all gone. Your hair's burned.
You lost your sperm.
Yeah. You found out that your boys can't swim. You can only turn yourself into a white guy. You can only have blonde hair. Just piling on. Which kind of makes you wonder how he doesn't just snap, And we did neglect to mention that Malabolgia was happy when Spawn threatened that former colleague, that lecherous guy from the CIA, because Malabolgia is like, give in to your violent tendencies. That's what I need, right? Like, give in to the dark side, if you will, to borrow a Star Wars reference. So,
but there was one positive thing. The one positive thing is that the dog at least showed some sign of knowing it was Al,
Yeah. Yeah, his wife even says, look, the dog likes you. Nobody, it was my late husband's dog. She hasn't warmed up to anybody since he died. But the other thing that we haven't mentioned yet that's also a pile-on for Al Simmons is not only is his ex-wife remarried, She got married to his best friend.
Ooh, another knife.
I mean, oh my God. I mean, that's now
Oh,
granted it's not like he got divorced and this because that to me that's unforgivable. You would
yeah,
never do that. You know your friend divorces a woman and then you turn around your best friend divorces a woman you turn around and marry her. No, that's unacceptable. That no, it can't happen.
mm,
But he was dead and they eventually didn't happen right away. But eventually they found comfort in each other's arms. But still for him he's back and to see his wife with somebody else. But at the same time he loves her so much that and there's a lot of exposition here again. He's talking to his own wife and his best friend, and he's saying, "I miss my wife, but I can't bring myself to intrude on her happiness. I know she has everything she ever wanted now." And they don't realize, Terry and Wanda obviously don't realize that this blonde stranger is talking about Wanda. So again, it's just the
yeah.
twist of the knife
And
and
I,
us realizing just how bad Spawn has it, really.
yeah, and just to reemphasize again, and for those watching on YouTube can see all that you blocked out in terms of the exposition, but for those listening on the podcast, there's a lot of exposition here. And what's extraordinary about this is we actually don't need most of this exposition. Yet it doesn't take away from the narrative, but we really don't need. I mean, he's got a low sperm count. He's a white guy. He's supposed to be black. He's lost his wife. I mean, only his dog recognizes him. I mean, the devil he's made a deal with the devil. We can imagine what he's feeling. We don't actually need all this description. In fact, I know one of a modern day writer would allow the artist to create very facial expressions to convey the emotion and allow the reader to imagine what Al Simmons is feeling. But here, McFarlane goes out of his way to spell it out for the reader. I think unnecessarily, but yet at the same time, as we said earlier, there's something strangely enticing about this, with McFarlane sort of spelling it out for the reader, not really allowing us to come to our own determination as to what Al Simmons is feeling. We're really literally being told. So it's it's a more direct kind of storytelling than what I think we're accustomed to nowadays.
Yeah, and I think it does also, as much as we're praising McFarlane for really doing a better job of writing this than he probably got credit for at the time, it is a little bit of a sign of a
Dated.
rookie writer, right?
Yeah.
It's a bit of a rookie writer mistake to not let the art tell the story, especially when your art's as good as McFarlane. So, but anyway,
Yeah.
Al's pretty upset, as you can imagine. He screams out, "No! Why are you torturing me? Sadistic pleasure! You want my soul? Come and get it!" Like he is fired up, screaming at who he doesn't know because he doesn't actually and has not yet met or doesn't have memory of Malabolgia, who's taken it. And I love it. He doesn't blame Terry. He doesn't blame Wanda. He blames this devil that he made the deal with, saying, "You've taken Wanda from me. You've taken my face. You've taken my existence. Uh, you've shown that it was my fault that we couldn't have a child. How can I ethically in the middle of that? If you're going to screw me, I'm going to screw you. You want my soul? Come and get it. Let's see who's got the power." And as if on cue, we're told, then the Violator shows up, and this is where we see Spawn discover, as we discovered last issue, that this dumpy little clown-looking guy uh, is actually the Violator. That's his disguise, and he uses his power that he also got from Malabolgia to turn into a Violator. And Spawn's like, "You know what? I don't know who or what you are, but I don't really care because I'm pissed off and I'm ready to beat the crap out of something." So uh, Violator's not used to being stood up to, number one. Number two, he's used to being able to just reach into somebody, rip out their heart, and that be the end of it, right? And his job is to sort of keep an eye on Spawn, or at least that's what he's been told. So without hesitation, he does reach right into Al Simmons' chest, rips out his heart, and says, "Well, that was no big deal." He's like, "This guy was supposed to be special to the big guy, to my boss. Obviously not special enough. People need to fear the Violator." And he starts walking away. And then he hears a voice from behind him softly say, "Violator, who said anything about me being human?" And we see that Spawn is standing up. He's recovered, but he's got a gaping hole in his chest where we see some green light emanating from. And we're told next issue, all hell breaks loose on Earth. So it leads into the big confrontation between Violator and Spawn on Earth. So yeah, a lot of fun and really well paced. Got a big chunk of story here. It was, I sort of feel like the first issue introduced Spawn, Second issue introduced Violator, who's going to be a big part of the story, at least early on. And this third issue, we really start moving forward with the story of Al Simmons. Like, we are given a lot of information about all the things that are sort of stacked against him here, and starting to understand his position in terms of how much he loves his wife, that he's willing to let her go, but also the fact that if he's going to get a chance to lash out, if he's going to get a chance to use his powers to sort of as a coping mechanism for everything he's dealing with, then he's going to start now, and he's going to start by beating up out of the Violator apparently next issue. So yeah, I mean, again, I'm really surprised how well this holds up, and I honestly don't remember enjoying this as much when I was reading them, when they came out. But again, I'd read these off the stand. I read them off the comic rack, bought them at the store, took them home, read them, put them in a bag, and haven't read them since. So it's been almost 30 years. It's been 29 years since I've actually read this, and yeah, really, really enjoying it. So anything else to add about this issue, Rocky, before we wrap up?
Just one of the things that Todd McFarlane in early interviews before Spawn came out and during it was, he compared Spawn to Batman, and saying the one thing that Spawn can do that Batman can't, and that Superman can't, because Superman and Batman are too corporate. And at that time, Spawn was a new character, and people have to remember that he didn't know that Spawn would necessarily be as successful on the longest running independent comic of all time, although he had hopes. The idea is that Spawn can kill, and Spawn is a killer. I mean, Al Simmons did work for the government, and also every time Spawn uses his power, he becomes that much closer to dying a second time, after which his soul, he will permanently reside in hell. So he's got a vested interest not only in accomplishing his objectives, but using as little of his power as possible. And so if he has an opportunity to eliminate a problem, he's going to do it, and he's going to kill it. He's not going to like save a villain like Batman would the Joker. No, Spawn is going to eliminate it. And you got a sense that more was at stake with Al Simmons, and you got a sense of the gravitas of his and the perils of his situation, and it was magnified precisely because of McFarlane's very stark and black and white contrast between these are the bad guys here and these are the good guys. Al is a really good guy, even though he was a killer. He's got a gorgeous wife. His wife, Wanda, it was established, created a foundation for disabled children in her husband's name. I mean, she's just like, and she looks gorgeous. I mean, she's got a beautiful daughter. I mean, the stark contrast between the bad and the good in these first three issues is right there, and it's obvious, which makes the and we'll get into it in the next three issues as we move toward these 12 days of Spawnmas, that it really drives home what's going to happen. And of course, those moments where Spawn ultimately has to confront the devil and some other and a certain serial killer that we'll get into as this story progresses. But I really like this, and I've got a new appreciation for Spawn, and I'm looking forward as we keep counting down these Christmas 12 days.
Yeah, I agree 100%. So we hope you're following along. We hope you're enjoying them as well. We haven't mentioned this before, we probably should. If you don't have any of these issues, they're available relatively cheaply on Comixology. I think if you have Comixology Unlimited, that they're a part of that. If you don't, you can buy digital packages.
Yeah, I picked up the first 6 issues for, I think it was $3.99 for the first 6 issues of Spawn, and I thought that was a heck of a deal. And that's, of course, you're probably better off for double that price. You get access to the entire library of Comixology, so you might just want to just get a monthly subscription.
Yep, agreed. So anyway, we hope you guys are enjoying it. Don't forget to check out our other 12 days of the Comic Source content. We got plenty of other stuff coming out for you. And if you're watching us on YouTube, be sure you head over to your favorite podcast platform or application. Do a search for the Comic Source and subscribe so you don't miss any of our audio content. If you're listening audio only, when you get a chance, head over to YouTube. Do a search for Comic Space Boom ! That's Rocky's channel. That's where we release a lot of the videos for the collaborations that we do. And you don't want to miss any of that stuff either, or any of the in-depth stuff that Rocky does on his own. So give him a subscribe, ring that notification bell so you know when new content comes out. as well as liking this video. So again, we want to wish everybody happy holidays, whatever it is you celebrate. We hope it's a joyous time. Maybe you celebrate Spawnmas, the new holiday season that we have created here. So be sure you tune in tomorrow for episode 4. Like I said, check out all our other holiday content that's coming out this week, this couple weeks leading into Christmas. And we appreciate you guys joining us as always. So we will talk to you next time.
See you later.